Mr. Senate President, my distinguished colleagues, I'm Senator George Thompson Sekibo. I represent the Rivers East Central District. Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity to move the motion on the non-payment of the sum of $200 million accrual from oil mining leases, OMLs, by Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited under the SPDC/NNPC joint venture agreement and illegal and lawful renewal of oil mining leases by the Ministry of Petroleum Resources to the Department of Petroleum Resources, DPR, contrary to the provision of paragraph 10 of the first schedule to the Petroleum Act 1969, now Section 81 and Section 86, Section 86.1 and Section 86.6 of the Petroleum Act 2022. I move. The Senate knows that one of the major sources of revenue for the nation is through oil exploration and exploration businesses, which was founded and established in 1957. Understand that since the oil exploration and exploration business is a specialized business venture, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, on behalf of the federal government, initiated several joint venture agreements with international oil companies operating in Nigeria. Aware that the joint venture agreement include oil exploration licenses, oil prospecting licenses, oil mining leases, and assignment. Recognize that the first schedule to the Petroleum Act 1969 gave a term of 20 years for any oil mining lease and subject to renewal for another 20 years, as enshrined in paragraph 10 of the Petroleum Act 1969, as given below. The term of an oil mining lease shall not exceed 20 years, but may be renewed in accordance with this Act. Further recognize that the Petroleum Industrial Act 2022, recently assented to law by the President, is also explicit in Section 86.1 and 86.6. 86.1. A petroleum mining lease granted under Section 81 of this Act shall be for a maximum period of 20 years, which term shall include the development period prescribed under subsection 4. Subsection 86.6. A petroleum mining lease which continues to produce in paying quantities may be renewed by the Commission in accordance with the Section 87 of this Act for one or more successive additional terms of not more than 20 years each, provided that the field continues to produce in paying quantities, and all rent, royalties, taxes, and other applicable fiscal obligations stipulated under this Act shall continue subject to Section 87 of this Act. Observe that the SPDC NNPC joint venture agreement in contravention of the provision of the Petroleum Act 1969 by the defunct Department of Petroleum Resources and the Ministry of Petroleum Resources spuriously granted to the SPDC NNPC a 30-year oil mining lease from 1959 to 1989, thereby legally extending the oil mining lease by 10 years. In the first instance, instead of the prescribed term of 20 years, without recourse to the provision of the Petroleum Act 1969 in paragraph 10 of the first schedule as given above. Observes further that upon the expiration of the initial oil mining lease in 1989, SPDC/NNPC joint venture was granted another 30 years mining lease, again from 1st July 1989 to 30th June 2019 by the Ministry of Petroleum Resources to DPR, instead of the 20 years lease period prescribed by the Petroleum Act, which is contrary to paragraph 10 of the first schedule to the said Act. Concerned that the initial additional 10 years mining lease of 1969 to 1989 illegally granted to the joint venture by the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, the federal government lost from fees, taxes, rent, and royalties the sum of $120 million, while in the second instance of the extra 10 years, the federal government also lost a further sum of $80 million, making a total of $200 million. We regret that the loss of $200 million, which is equivalent to 83 billion naira, is a colossal loss of money that could have been of great value to the economy of the nation. Notes that this illegal action by the Ministry of Petroleum Resources to DPRO as regards the SPDC NNPC joint venture may not be only non-compliant grants a detail of other joint ventures agreement with Chevron Nigeria Limited, any joint venture, Exxon Mobil Upstream joint venture, Total E&P Nigeria Limited joint venture, need to be ascertained through a thorough investigation to verify compliance with the provision of the extant law. Notes further that the trend of illegal exercise of joint venture period from 20 years to 30 years lease period without recourse to the Petroleum Act may have also applied to the above-mentioned joint ventures agreement with the IOCs and needs to be investigated. Informed that SPDC went to court on the clarity of the lease period and the judgment was not in their favor as regards the additional 10 years period in the two instances. Regrettably, the court failed to order the SPDC to pay the arrears, the 20 years lease period, to the tune of $200 million to the federal government for illegal extension. Further informed that a whistleblower has petitioned the EFCC on the need to recover the sum of $200 million from the SPDC for this illegal extension by the Ministry of Petroleum Resources to DPR, and to further investigate all other joint venture agreements that involve in the aforementioned IOCs. Concerned that the power to make laws for the Federation as vested in the National Assembly by the Constitution also encompasses the power to make laws for the promotion of national prosperity and dynamic self-reliance economy as provided in Section 16(1)(a) of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. Concerned also that the same Constitution gives power to each house of the National Assembly to carry out. Okay, so, you don't need all that. Yeah. Okay, I go down. Go to your prayer. The major issues are prayer. All right. Let me go to the prayers, Mr. President. Accordingly resolved, urge the EFCC to investigate the oil mining leases granted to SPDC between 1959 to 1989 and 1989 to 2019 under the SPDC NNPC joint venture agreement, and compel SPDC to refund to the federal government the sum of $200 million or any amount short of what was paid under the said lease agreement. 2, urge the EFCC to investigate the separate joint venture agreement between the NNPC and the following IOCs: Chevron Nigeria Limited, any joint venture, Exxon Mobil Upstream joint venture, and Total E&P Nigeria Limited joint venture. Urge EFCC to recover any sum short of what the IOCs ought to have paid to cover up the period under review. Mandate the Senate Committee on Anti-Corruption and Financial Crimes to follow up on the implementation of the above prayers and regularly brief the Senate of progress made accordingly at 4 years interval. Mr. President, in 4 weeks interval, Mr. President, I so move.
Deputy Senate Leader.